The priority channel indicator blinked 3 times. Commander Fintan Rook opened it. The transmission from Dustfall lasted less than a full second, the audio cutting off before the first word could complete. But the visual frame stayed frozen on the main screen. A distortion moved through the settlement. Buildings collapsed inward, not outward. The walls folded like paper drawn into a drain. There was no debris field, no dust cloud, just absence where structures had been. Rook killed the loop. He touched the scar on his jaw. Someone should have warned us. He turned. Kith-ni-Vael stood at the far end of the deck, silver feathers catching the emergency light. The tips of those feathers were dark, almost charcoal. "You have something to say," Rook said. His voice came out flat, used up. Kith opened his beak. A rhythmic clicking sounded, the cultural marker of sincerity among his people. The hollow has arrived. A 6-second silence stretched across the deck. No one moved. Doctor Lena Tarrow broke it first. She was at her station, thin fingers hovering over a keypad. Her lower lip was already chewed raw. "You monitored this pattern and you did not tell us." "I was not certain." "Certainty," Rook said, "is for people who don't have bodies to bury." Kith's feathers darkened further. They shifted from charcoal toward the color of ash. "The Arae do not fight the hollow. We have never fought it. We navigated around it. We fled before it." His voice dropped. "We left entire systems empty." Rook stared at him, "Then you ran." "We survived. There are 60,000 people on Dustfall." Kith had no answer for that. His beak pressed shut. Ryn-tha-Sol spoke without looking up from the data slab she held. Her hands moved across its surface in slow sweeps, reading the vibrations through her sensory nodules. "The hollow does not attack. It consumes. It rewrites local spacetime into a state that cannot support life. The process is slow but accelerating." "Accelerating how?" Tarrow asked. Ryn tilted her head. "The first distortion appeared 6 cycles ago. The second appeared 4 cycles later. The third will appear sooner. There is a pattern of compression. Each collapse accelerates the next." "Then it learns," Rook said. Ryn's wing membranes rippled. "That is one interpretation." Sergeant Marcus Hale stepped forward from the wall he had been leaning against. His voice carried without amplification. "Then we arm the transports. Every colonist who can't fight waits in a compartment with a blast door, and everyone who can stacks bodies in the corridor." Rook did not look at him. "We have no ammunition to spare." "Then we use the ships themselves," Hale pressed. "Ram them into the—" "No ammunition," Rook repeated. "I said what I meant." The silence stretched for another 3 seconds. Hale's jaw tightened. He turned away. Tarrow pointed at her screen. Her hand shook, but her voice stayed steady. "The long-range sensors are picking up a second distortion at the edge of the system." Rook limped across the deck. His knee ached. It always ached. When he reached her station, he leaned in and read the data twice. It was larger than the first, 3 times the area of effect, maybe more. He straightened a course. "Straight line," Tarrow said. Then she paused. "No, correction, it just changed direction." Rook's stomach went cold. "Toward what?" Her hands moved faster across the console. She pulled up a trajectory overlay. The curved line crossed the display and stopped at a single point. "Avalon Station." Rook remained motionless. No reaction. The numbers ticked across the screen. "How long?" Tarrow swallowed. 18 hours. Hale muttered something under his breath. Kith's feathers had gone fully dark, silver swallowed by ash-colored defeat. But Ryn held up something none of them had seen before. A cube the size of a human fist, smooth as polished bone. She held it in both hands, her fingers tracing its edges with the same slow sweeps she used on the data slab. It hummed. The vibration traveled through the command deck floor and into Rook's boots, up through his legs, settling in his teeth. "I found it inside the Dustfall wreckage," Ryn said. "It was stuck to a collapsed bulkhead." "That's impossible," Tarrow whispered. "Nothing survives that kind of collapse." Ryn tilted her head. She did not disagree. Kith stepped closer, his feathers lifted at the neck. "What is it?" The object hummed louder. Rook reached out and touched it. The surface felt smooth under his fingers, but something else pushed against his palm. Roughness where there should have been no roughness. Texture where the geometry had no right to hold it. The sensation crawled up his arm and settled behind his eyes. He looked at his reflection in the cube's surface. The face staring back was his, older, grayer, the eyes were closed. Rook pulled his hand away. He looked at the frozen transmission frame on the main screen. He looked at the trajectory overlay showing the second distortion. He looked at the closed-eyed reflection still burned into his memory. "That object is not from our time," Ryn said. "Then where is it from?" She ran her fingers across the cube once more. "From a timeline that no longer exists. A future that was erased. The manufacturing marks on the surface match civilizations that have not been founded yet and never will be." Rook felt the cold certainty settle into his chest. The object was a message from a failure so complete that the timeline itself had collapsed under its weight. And it had arrived here, now for him. "What does it contain?" Tarrow asked. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. Ryn pressed her palms flat against the cube's surface. She closed her eyes. Her wing membranes flickered. "Schematics," she said. "A weapon, designed to kill something that has no body." The hum deepened. The emergency lights flickered faster. Rook looked at the closed-eyes reflection one more time. He knew what the message meant. It meant that someone in that erased future had built something terrible enough to break the hollow. And they had sent it backward through the collapse of their own existence so that someone else would find it. Someone who would be willing to burn. The command deck went quiet. The second distortion adjusted course again. It was accelerating. 18 hours. Rook turned to Kith. His voice carried no anger anymore, just the flat exhaustion of a man who had run out of alternatives. "Tell me everything you know about how to kill something that has no body." Kith's feathers shivered. "We do not know." "Then we are going to learn." Rook picked up the object. The hum vibrated through his palm and into his wrist. His reflection did not appear in the surface this time. The cube had gone dark. The second distortion kept coming. The hum started in Lena's teeth. 4 hours of measurements. 4 hours of contradictions. The impossible object sat on the sterile table like it owned the space around it, and the containment field flickered at its edges, embarrassed by its own uselessness. The material was older than the universe. Lena stared at the readout for the 7th time. The isotopes should not exist. The atomic structure predated the cosmic background radiation by a margin that made no sense. Every decay chain was flat. 0. The object had not aged a single nanosecond since before time began. It felt like a perfect lie. She took a sip of her coffee. It was cold. She drank it anyway. At the far end of the table, Kith-ni-Vael stood with his wings folded so tight his silver feathers pressed into his chest like overlapping plates. He had not spoken in 30 minutes. He had not moved in 20. The Arae did not fidget. They went still instead, still like prey animals hoping the predator would pass. Lena set the cup down. The vibration from the object made the surface of the liquid shiver in expanding rings. A drop of water near the base of the cup trembled in place, refusing to fall. Ryn-tha-Sol broke the silence from her console. Her blind eyes were closed. Her wing membranes spread wide to read the room's vibrations. "There is a sequence," she said. Her voice carried the rhythmic clicking of her species, a sound like small stones tapping glass. "The quantum states are not random. Each one encodes a set of instructions. The pattern is too structured. This is a program." Lena turned. "A program for what?" Ryn's head tilted. Her sensory nodules pulsed along the edges of her wings. "I do not know yet, but it is not a message. It is not meant to be read. It is meant to be executed." Kith spoke. His voice was flat, clinical, the way he delivered every piece of bad news since he stepped onto this station. "We found one before," he said, "centuries ago. The Council buried it on a dead world in the Veilshard border territories. We sealed it in a vault. We marked the coordinates. We left." Lena's jaw tightened, and when we returned, the world was gone. The object had erased itself from history. The star chart showed empty space where a planet should have been. Our own records contradicted themselves. The object had not been destroyed. It had never existed. The humming in Lena's teeth deepened. She pressed her tongue against her molars, trying to find the source of the vibration. It was everywhere. It was nowhere. "You told us the hollow was coming," she said. "You did not tell us you had already seen its tools." Kith did not answer. His feathers shifted at the tips, darkening from silver to slate gray, dark gray, the color of alarm on Arae's skin. A chime from the wall terminal, the docking bay. Lena answered it with a tap of her finger. The display showed a civilian transport, markings from Dustfall. No clearance request. No approach vector. Just a ship that had landed without permission, its docking clamps screaming as the bay tried to lock around a hull that did not match the readouts. The pilot's voice came through the speaker, thin, broken. We have wounded, please. We have wounded. The distortion reached us before the evacuation. Lena was already moving. She left the coffee. She left the object. She left Kith standing frozen at the end of the table with his feathers darkening like a storm front. The docking bay smelled like copper. Old blood, fresh blood. The antiseptic sprays the medics used between triage stations. The floor was slick with something Lena did not look at directly. She stepped around it. 15 survivors, maybe more. The transport had been a mining hauler retrofitted with passenger seats made of bolted-down crates. The wounded were laid out on the deck on blankets on the torn-out seats themselves. A medic knelt beside a woman whose arm was bent at 2 angles that should not exist in a human skeleton. The medic was trying to set it. The woman was not screaming. That was worse. Someone grabbed Lena's arm. A man, miner's coveralls, the name patch reading Darin. His eyes were too wide. His pupils were the same size, which meant he was not in shock. He was in something else. "You need to see," he said. "You need to see what it looked like." Lena stopped, saw what? The distortion, inside it, I saw a face. His voice cracked. He was not afraid. He was past afraid. He was in the territory where the mind decides to leave the body because the body cannot carry what the mind has witnessed. It was not a face, he said. It was a pattern of absence, like someone cut a person-shaped hole in the air and the hole looked back at me. He started screaming. The medic came fast, a syringe in hand. The sedative hit Darin's neck and he went slack, his eyes still open, still too wide, still seeing something that was not in this room. Lena backed away, her hand found a bulkhead. The metal was cold, the hum was in her teeth again. She walked back to the lab. Ryn was still at the console. Kith had not moved. The object sat on its sterile table, humming its impossible frequency, and the display on Ryn's terminal showed a single line of translated text. Ryn read it aloud. Her voice was quiet, the clicking soft, almost gentle. "When the emptiness arrives, do not hide. The emptiness cannot consume what is already broken. Break yourself willingly." Silence. Lena looked at the words. She looked at the object. She looked at Kith. His feathers were fully dark, black. The color Arae feathers turned only when the creature wearing them expected to die. He would not meet her eyes. He already knew. The station's hull creaked. A long, slow groan like a ship under pressure it was not designed to withstand. The sound traveled through the deck plates, up through Lena's boots into her spine. She turned to Ryn. "How far out is the second distortion?" Ryn's sensors pulsed. Her wings vibrated, she had already checked. 12 hours, she said, maybe less. It crossed the gas giant's orbit 40 minutes ago. Lena stared at the line of text on the screen. "Break yourself willingly." It was not a metaphor. The object was not asking for surrender. It was asking for destruction. Deliberate, controlled, something precious sacrificed to make a weapon that would consume whoever wielded it. She turned to Kith. "You knew what this would cost. You brought it here. You let us touch it without telling us what it would ask." Kith's voice was low. The clicking was gone. His sincerity markers had abandoned him. "You are the only species we have ever seen that does not run. The Hollow has chased us across 4,000 years of space. We have never fought. We have only fled. But you stood on a moon with 15,000 colonists and did not evacuate. You called it a last stand." His eyes met hers. They were black, the same black as his feathers. "We brought the object here because we cannot do what it asks. But you can. You break things and call it survival." The hum in Lena's teeth sharpened. She felt it in her skull now, a pressure, a question. She looked at the object. It was not asking for a sacrifice. It was asking for a volunteer. The station AI spoke from the overhead speakers. Its voice was calm, flat, the voice of a machine that did not understand fear. "Commander Rook has ordered a station-wide broadcast. The evacuation plan is suspended. All personnel are to report to designated stations for emergency conversion protocols. Atmospheric processor array will be retuned for electromagnetic pulse deployment. Estimated completion, 11 hours. 11 hours? The object hummed, and the emptiness was coming. Sergeant Marcus Hale pressed his back against the bulkhead. The corridor stank of ozone and burnt circuitry. A repair drone twitched under the fallen conduit, its copper legs still scrabbling against the deck plates. No real purpose left in it, just the echo of a command that had nowhere to go. Emergency lights painted everything in surgical red. The outer defense grid hammered something beyond the hull, muffled detonations that vibrated through the deck plates, each one a little closer than the last. Radar showed nothing. The guns were firing at ghosts. Hale did not believe in ghosts. 3 Marines crouched behind him, local recruits with fresh tattoos and damp palms. The one closest to him, Private First Class Ortega, had her rifle angled at the junction where the corridor turned. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was not. The other 2, Rivers and a kid whose name Hale kept forgetting, covered the opposite direction. They had trained for boarders, for raiders, for anything with a pulse that could be shot. This was not that. The Arae technician crouched at the junction box, his silver feathers slicked flat against his skull. He was trying to lock down the environmental controls, his clawed fingers working the access panel with the twitchy precision of someone who had never been in a firefight. Hale did not know his name. The Arae had names that clicked and whistled, and Hale's jaw could not make those shapes. Does not matter what his name is. A flicker on the corridor camera. Hale saw it in the corner of his eye, a smudge on the monitor mounted above the technician's head. He turned to look. The shimmer moved against the airflow. It was heat haze, but the corridor was cold. A ripple in the light, like the air itself had decided to fold wrong. It drifted past the junction box, slow and deliberate, and Hale's hand found the grip of his rifle before his brain finished processing the threat. His mouth opened to shout a warning. The shimmer touched the technician. The Arae's head snapped up. His beak parted. His feathers compressed against his body so hard they looked painted on. He did not make a sound. His eyes stayed open, his pupils fixed, and his body went down like a puppet with its strings cut. His claws scraped once against the deck, then stopped. Hale put 3 rounds through the shimmer. The bullets passed clean through. They sparked off the far bulkhead. One of them caught the edge of a support strut and screamed sideways into the kid's thigh. The kid, Denning, that was his name, went down with a wet grunt, his leg opening up in a bloom of red. The shimmer did not react. It just hung there, rippling, doing nothing. Hale grabbed Denning by the collar of his armor and hauled. The kid was heavy. The deck was slick with something that might have been hydraulic fluid. Rivers opened fire, panicked, 3-round bursts that carved trenches in the far wall and did nothing to the thing in the corridor. The shimmer receded. It did not move away. It simply stopped being there. 1 second it was visible, the next it was not. But the temperature kept dropping. Hale felt it in his sinuses first. A sharp, dry cold that hurt to breathe through, then in his fingers. The frost spread across the bulkhead in a crawling white lattice fast enough to watch. His glove stuck when he touched the wall. The cold bit through the fabric like teeth. Ortega pulled Rivers back. She had his radio. She was shouting into it, demanding a clear channel, but her voice was thin and wrong. Hale dragged Denning past the crushed drone. The kid's boots scraped across the deck. He was conscious but quiet, one hand clamped over the wound, his face the color of the emergency lights. They reached the blast door. Hale slapped his code into the panel. The display accepted it. The door did not open. He tried again. The station AI's voice came through the overhead speaker, calm and unhurried. Bulkhead 4C is currently occupied. Occupant identity, unknown. Recommend alternative route. Hale slammed his palm against the panel. There was no alternative route. This was the spine corridor. Every other path led through the maintenance shafts or the reactor wing, and both of those were sealed for atmospheric reasons he did not have time to remember. Then his personal comm crackled. Ryn-tha-Sol's voice came through, clipped and fast, her words running together like a single long note. She had found a way to activate the object. It required a living neural mesh pilot. She was asking for volunteers. Hale stared at the viewport on the blast door. On the other side of the glass, the shimmer was coalescing. It took a shape. A human silhouette, shoulders, arms, a head tilted slightly as if it was listening for something. But there was nothing inside the outline, no face, no features, just the shape of a man rendered in absence, like a hole in the visible world that happened to be standing upright. It did not move, it just waited. Hale understood. The hollow was not a monster, it was a mirror. It showed you the shape of your own emptiness, not what you feared, not something you could fight, just the space inside you that was already hollow and waiting to be filled. He looked away. Denning was bleeding out on the deck. Ortega had her rifle pressed against the viewport, her finger white on the trigger, but she was not firing. She was frozen. The blast door cycled open on its own. The other side was empty. No shimmer, no shape, no frost on the walls. Hale stepped through, dragging Denning with him. The corridor was warm, the air was stale and normal. The lights were standard white. He did not believe it. The hollow was not gone. It had moved past them. It was inside the station now, and it was heading for the command deck. His comm unit buzzed again. Ryn-tha-Sol's voice repeating the request, the words a little faster now. Neural mesh pilot, volunteer. Hale looked at Denning's wound, at Ortega's face, at the empty corridor ahead of him. He keyed his comm. Tell me where to go. Rook sat in the command chair. The impossible object rested on a cushion beside him, its surface smooth as polished bone. 5 hours until impact. The main screens were mostly dead, reduced to static and flickering diagnostic lines. Lena Tarrow sat on the floor near his feet, checking the neural mesh interface cable. She ran her fingers along the conduit, feeling for microfractures. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was shallow. Ryn-tha-Sol stood near the door, her head tilted at an angle that read the room through vibrations. Her wing membranes were half spread, the sensory nodules catching every tremor in the hull. Kith-ni-Vael hunched over a console at the far end of the deck, monitoring the station's failing systems. His silver feathers lay flat against his neck, tight as armor plating. 3 station crews sat against the far wall, writing on datapads, final messages. Rook had not ordered them to stop. Ryn spoke first, her voice carrying a rhythmic click that meant she was being careful. The object's program requires a pilot. The pilot must link their neural mesh to the artifact. The mesh will feed the pilot's consciousness into the object, and the object will generate a reality shift pulse. The pulse will push the hollow out of local space. Rook touched the scar on his jaw. He had heard the word consciousness and knew what it meant to feed something into a machine. Lena looked up from the cable. Her face was pale. What happens to the pilot? Ryn did not answer immediately. Her head rotated slowly toward the object, as if listening for something that had no sound. The data in the object is incomplete. I cannot read the final execution sequence. She paused, but the pattern suggests the pilot's mind will be overwritten, or disassembled. The object treats consciousness as raw material. Lena stood up, her hands were shaking now. No, absolutely not, we find another way. Rook stood, the command chair creaked behind him. I am not asking permission. Lena stepped toward him. Fintan, you have a collapsed lung from 3 years ago. Your neural mesh was patched with salvage parts. You are not a candidate for experimental reality manipulation. He looked at her. She was right about the lung. She was right about the mesh. None of it mattered. I am the only pilot on this station with a functioning implant, he said. The others are dead or in medical. The Thornwood is grounded until we clear the bay. There is no one else. The station AI spoke, her voice flat and dispassionate. Warning, the distortion has entered the atmosphere. Time to surface contact, 4 hours, 53 minutes. Rook turned toward the viewport. The sky was changing. The color did not exist in the visible spectrum. It was a deep non-color, a bruise on reality. His eyes watered just looking at it. The reflection on the viewport looked like a hole in vision itself, like something had been carved out of the world and the hole was still spreading. Lena whispered, "That is not light. That is the absence of light wearing light as a disguise." Kith straightened at his console. He did not turn around. "We have never done this," he said. His voice was quiet. "The Arae have not sacrificed a life to fight the Hollow, not once. We believed life was too precious to waste in combat. We built ships to run. We built our entire civilization on the principle that survival was better than valor." Rook laughed, a dry sound that did not reach his eyes. "We just call it Tuesday," he said. Kith turned, his feathers fluffed in distress, a sign of fear his species rarely showed. The gesture was involuntary. "You find this amusing?" Rook shook his head. "No, I find it familiar. You have never had to decide who dies so the rest can live. We have been making that choice since we climbed down from trees. It is not valor. It is just math." Lena grabbed his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Fintan, please." He looked at her. Her eyes were wet. She did not blink. "I have 2 kids on evac transport 14, he said. "They are scheduled to leave orbit in 6 hours. If the Hollow hits this station, the transport does not launch. The math is simple." He pulled his arm free. "Ryn, connect the cable." Ryn picked up the cable. Her hands were trembling. The Arae did not normally tremble. Their bodies ran hot, their muscles designed for sustained flight, not fear. But her hands were shaking as she brought the connector toward the object. She hesitated. "The object will not remember you," she said. "After the protocol executes, the pilot's identity will be erased. You will not survive. You will not leave a trace." Rook sat back down in the command chair. He picked up the object. It hummed against his palm. The surface felt rough in a place his fingers could not reach, like the texture of a wound that had not healed. "I know," he said. He looked at the sky. The non-color was spreading. It was almost beautiful, a deep bruise on the fabric of everything. "If this works, you have 12 minutes to get clear," he said. "The Thornwood can make it to the evacuation lane in 10 if you push the engines past red line. You take the object with you. You figure out how to use it again if you need to." He paused. "If it does not work, do not bother coming back." Lena opened her mouth to argue. Rook held up his hand. "Sergeant Hale is still alive in that corridor. Ortega and Denning are with him. They need evacuation. You have your orders." Lena closed her mouth. Her jaw was tight. Ryn moved forward. She pressed the cable connector against the port at the base of Rook's skull. The click was a sound he had heard 1,000 times, neural mesh sync, standard procedure. But this time it echoed. The sound reverberated through the deck like a bell striking in an empty room. Ryn stepped back. He felt it immediately. The object was not a hum. It was a certainty, a knowledge pressed into his mind like a handprint in wet cement. The object was from a timeline that had ended because it chose to hide. The people of that timeline had the weapon. They had the means, but they hesitated. They believed life was too precious to risk, and so they hid. The Hollow found them anyway. The object had been sent forward as a warning, a message from the dead. This timeline will end if it chooses to break. Rook saw the path. It was a narrow line through a forest of probabilities. The path went through him. It was going to hurt someone he loved. The word love dissolved in his mind. He could not remember who he loved. He could not remember why. The object was rewriting him. His eyes went white. His body went rigid. The chair groaned under the sudden tension in his spine. Lena screamed something. He did not hear it. The object began to pulse, not with light, with something deeper, a pressure that pressed against the walls of the deck, that bent the air, that made the floor hum. The station AI spoke again. Her voice was different now, slower. "Protocol initiated." Rook opened his mouth. No sound came out. The non-color in the sky began to twist. Ryn-tha-Sol pressed her hands flat against the object's housing. The command deck smelled of ozone and copper. 2 minutes into the protocol, Commander Rook hung in his chair, eyes closed, breathing so shallow his chest barely moved. The object glowed with a light that cast no shadows, a light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The distortion outside had stopped advancing. It hovered a kilometer above the station, a patch of sky that was not sky, a hole where light refused to exist. Ryn's sensory nodules tingled. She shifted her grip on the object's surface and felt something wrong. Rook's neural signature was changing. It was no longer human. The pattern pouring through the mesh was becoming something that did not fit any known category. It was matching the Hollow's absence frequency, but inverted like a mirror held up to silence. "His mind is rewriting itself," she said. The words clicked from her beak tight and fast. "He is becoming a negative image of the distortion." Kith-ni-Vael stood behind her, feathers pressed flat against his skull. He said nothing. His breathing was the only sound in the room. Then the impossible object spoke. Not in words, not in sound. The images came directly into her skull, bypassing every sense she had. She saw a sky full of stars. They were going out one by one, each extinction a low thrum in her bones. She saw a civilization not human, not Arae, something older than both, standing on a world that was unraveling at the edges. They had built the object. They had not built it as a weapon. They had built it as a record. The images shifted. She saw the Hollow descend on that ancient world. She saw it consume not flesh, not stone, but the space between things, the difference between one person and another, one thought and the next. The civilization tried to fight. They threw every weapon they had. The Hollow absorbed them all. It was not harmed by force. It was fed by it. They failed because they tried to fight it. The object was a suicide note that contained a plan. Ryn pulled her hands back. The images stopped. Her breath came in ragged bursts, her chest heaving under her feathers. Kith stood frozen, his beak slightly open, his eyes fixed on a point that did not exist. "It does not consume matter," Kith said. His voice was hollow, stripped of its usual rhythmic clicks. "It consumes difference. It is attracted to systems that are not uniform. The more complex the system, the hungrier it becomes. Ryn understood before he finished. The object's plan was to make the station identical to the hollow, a flat emptiness that would not trigger its hunger. No thoughts, no variation, no life. A perfect mirror of the void outside. And the plan required a pilot to become that emptiness willingly. Rook was doing it. He was erasing himself from the inside so the station could match the hollow's frequency. So they could be ignored, overlooked, passed over like a stone among stones. Lena Tarrow screamed. She launched from the console, her white-knuckled grip releasing as she lunged toward the object. Ryn caught her arm, felt the human's heat, the trembling muscle, the desperate strength. Lena struggled. Her other hand clawed at Ryn's grip. "He is not a weapon," Lena said, her voice cracked. "He is a man." Ryn held on. The human's bones were denser than they looked, her muscles coiled with that infuriating resilience. But Ryn had been born blind in a species that valued sight above all else. She had learned to hold on to things that wanted to fall. "I know," Ryn said. The words came out softer than she expected. The object broadcast a second image. This time it hit all of them at once, Ryn, Kith, Lena, even the two unconscious crew members crumpled against the far wall. The image was clear, precise, brutal in its simplicity. The completed weapon was not the object. The object was just the trigger. The real weapon was the pilot. The human neural plasticity could reshape itself into any pattern, into any frequency, even a void. The object had been built by a civilization that could not adapt. Their minds were fixed, rigid, locked into their own biology. They could not become the emptiness. They could only record the solution and hope someone else could use it. Someone like a human. Outside, the distortion flickered. Ryn felt the shift through the station's hull, a change in pressure, a tremor in the metal. The hollow was confused. It hovered above them, unable to decide if the station was prey or part of itself. The pulse from Rook was working. The signal was bleeding out through the object, spreading through the station, making everything, the walls, the air, the people, flat and uniform and uninteresting. She reached out with her senses, searching for Rook's presence through the object. She found it. A fading warmth, like a hand letting go. He was not in pain. He was not afraid. He was satisfied. She felt the shape of his thought, the last coherent thing his mind would ever form. At least this counts. At least I did this. Ryn understood then. She understood with a clarity that hurt, that settled into her chest like a stone dropped into still water. Humans were not resilient because they survived. They were resilient because they chose to break in directions that saved others. That choice was the only thing the hollow could not consume. It could eat flesh, eat thought, eat the space between atoms. It could not eat a decision. Lena's grip on her arm went slack. She was staring at Rook's face, at the slack muscles, the shallow breath, the way his fingers twitched against the chair's armrest. "He is still in there," Lena whispered. "I can see him, he is still fighting." Ryn turned her attention back to the sensors. The distortion was withdrawing. It was pulling back, a slow retreat, like a tide that had lost interest in the shore. But the station's power grid flickered. Lights dimmed and surged. The hum of the object changed pitch, rising into something thin and brittle. Rook's life signs were dropping. The pulse was killing him. It was burning through his neural pathways, dissolving the connections that made him a person. His heart rate was falling. His respiration was shallow, irregular, a few seconds from ceasing entirely. And he had not finished the protocol. The object needed his mind fully dissolved before it would release the station. He was still holding on. Some part of him, some stubborn human part, was refusing to let go. Ryn pressed her palms back against the object's surface. She felt the failing warmth, the fading signal, the last ember of a man who had decided that his life was worth less than the people behind him. "He is not finished," Kith said. His voice was barely audible. Ryn shook her head. The distortion was still withdrawing, but slowly, too slowly. The hollow was not convinced yet. It was waiting, testing, seeing if the station would hold its disguise or flicker back into difference. Rook's warmth faded further, and the power grid flickered again. This time, the lights did not come back. Lena Tarrow could not feel her fingers anymore. The command deck was cold enough to see breath. The impossible object sat on the console between her and Rook, pulsing with a light that pressed through her closed eyelids like a blade. Rook was barely conscious. His mouth hung open, but no sound came out. His chest rose in shallow, irregular movements. The neural mesh cable ran from the base of his skull to the object's surface, and the connection point glowed the same sick white as the distortion outside. Lena reached for him. Her hand stopped an inch from his shoulder. The station AI spoke. Its voice was calm, too calm. Distortion field has withdrawn to upper atmosphere. It is holding at an altitude of 42 kilometers. It is not dispersing. Waiting. Kith-ni-Vael stood at the sensor bank, his silver feathers flattened against his skull. The pulse is not enough. The object required a complete dissolution. Rook has given it partial data. The entity is confused but not satisfied. Hale limped through the blast door. His rifle hung loose on its sling. Frost crusted the synthetic fibers of his uniform. He looked at Rook. He looked at the object. He looked at Lena. His jaw tightened. Tell me there is another plan. Lena shook her head. There is no other plan. The object is keyed to his neural signature. Only he can complete it. Hale raised his rifle, the barrel leveled at the object's surface. Then we disconnect him. We find another way. Lena moved before she thought. Her body blocked the line of fire. The object burned at her back, not heat, but a cold that felt like pressure, like something pushing through her skin from the inside. She screamed, but she did not step aside. If you disconnect now, his sacrifice means nothing. The words came out raw, hoarse. She did not recognize her own voice. Hale's finger rested on the trigger. His eyes were wet. His hand did not shake. She is right. Kith's voice cut through the hum of dying systems. His feathers had darkened to black at the tips. If the pilot is disconnected mid-transfer, the resonance collapses. The hollow will not simply resume its approach. It will accelerate. It will perceive the attempt as an attack. Hale lowered the rifle. He did not speak. He hooked the weapon back onto its sling and stood at the edge of the console. Lena turned back to the object. She grabbed it with both hands. The burn was immediate, not heat. Cold that bit deeper than temperature. Cold that felt like her bones were splitting from the inside. The skin on her palms blistered in seconds. Frost crawled up her forearms. She did not let go. Ryn-tha-Sol lunged for the cable. Her clawed hand closed around the line. Kith stopped her. His grip on her wrist was firm but not violent. The navigator hissed. Her blind eyes were wide, her sensory nodules flared open. He is dying. We are watching him die. Kith's voice was soft. If you disconnect now, his sacrifice means nothing. The same words Lena had used. He said them like a prayer. Ryn's hand fell away from the cable. She stood motionless, her wing membranes trembling. Lena looked at Rook's face. He was smiling. A small thing, tired. The smile of a man who had finished something heavy and was about to put it down. His lips moved. No sound came out. His throat was too dry, his lungs too shallow. She leaned closer. She read the words. Tell them I made it count. The object pulsed one final time. The light flared so bright it erased the room. Lena closed her eyes and still saw white through her lids. The vibration moved through her teeth, through her spine, through the deck plates beneath her boots. Then it stopped. The light died to a dull gray. Rook's body slumped forward. The neural mesh cable pulled free of its socket with a soft click. The flatline tone from the medical monitor did not last long. The AI cut it off after 3 seconds. Lena did not look at the monitor. She looked at his face. His eyes were half open. The smile was still there. He looked like a man who had just fallen asleep at his desk. She took his hand. It was already cooling. She did not cry. She pressed her forehead to his. She whispered into the hollow of his ear. You did not tell them anything, you idiot. You left me to do it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. No hum from the object, no static from the distortion, just the environmental system cycling, the low thrum of recycled air moving through vents, a sound so normal it felt like a lie. Hale turned to the viewport. The sky was blue again. Thin, cold, the same pale blue of Avalon's thin atmosphere. The non-color was gone. The distortion had dissolved. The hollow is gone. Kith's voice cracked when he said it. His feathers slowly lifted from his skull. He stared at the empty sky like a man who had never seen it before. Ryn ran her hands across the object. Her fingers traced its surface without looking. The program is complete. The frequency match was perfect. He gave it everything. Lena did not let go of Rook's hand. The frost on her palms was melting. The pain was starting to arrive, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Blisters formed across her skin in white rosettes. She did not care. She pressed her forehead harder against his. The command deck AI spoke again. Its voice was the same calm industrial tone it had used for the last decade. Incoming transmission from Arae homeworld. Priority level, council direct. Kith straightened, his feathers ruffled and settled. He crossed to the communications station and touched the panel with a trembling claw. The screen flickered, data scrolled in Arae script. Lena caught fragments, a star map, trajectory lines, a word she did not recognize but understood immediately from the way Kith's feathers flattened. Retreat, the hollow is retreating across multiple systems. He read the next line, his breath caught. But, Hale stepped closer to the screen. His voice was flat, but what? Kith did not answer immediately. He scrolled further. His claws left scratches on the panel. The transmission also contains a message from the paradox, the temporal race. Ryn turned toward him. Her blind eyes narrowed. What do they want? Kith's feathers went dark, all of them. They warn that the object's use has created a fracture in timeline integrity. Something else is now aware of this reality. Hale's rifle came off his shoulder. His hand closed around the grip. Aware of what? Kith looked at the screen, then at the dead object, then at Lena still holding Rook's cooling hand. It is approaching. The repair drones hummed a steady mechanical song. It was the first normal sound Lena had heard in hours. Welding arcs stitched hull cracks. Thermal blankets covered twisted conduits. The command deck smelled of burned insulation and recycled air, the smell of a station that had nearly died but refused to stop breathing. Lena's hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against the console to stop them. Ryn-tha-Sol stood at the far end of the room, her wing membranes half extended, her sensory nodules tracking the repair drone's swarm as it worked. She had not spoken since the pulse faded. Her silver feathers were flat against her skull. Kith-ni-Vael sat near the shattered viewport, staring at the sky. The sky was blue again, normal, as if the hollow had never touched it. Hale sat on the floor with his back against the bulkhead. His rifle lay across his knees. He had not let go of it since he walked onto the deck. His eyes were open but empty. Rook's body was in a thermal bag near the command chair. Someone had folded his hands across his chest. The bag was gray and anonymous. It looked like cargo. The impossible object sat on the console. Dull, silent, the hum that had lived in Lena's teeth was gone. A junior officer from the relief ship stood at the comm station. He was young. His uniform was clean. He had not been on Avalon when the distortion hit, and it showed in the way he moved, fast, confident, unbroken. His name was Ensign Leohart. He had arrived 20 minutes ago on a courier shuttle that had ignored every quarantine protocol. Lena did not blame him. The galaxy had stopped following rules. Hart turned from the comm panel. His face was pale. Dr. Tarrow, the paradox transmission is repeating. Lena looked up, put it on speaker. The room fell silent. The voice that came through the speakers was not a voice. It was a vibration that resolved into language, the same tone that had echoed through the object when Rook touched it. Flat, timeless, empty of emotion. What are you that you break time and call it survival? Lena stared at the object. It sat there inert, a fist-sized block of impossibly smooth material that had held a dead man's consciousness and spat it back as a weapon. She walked to the console. She picked up the object. It was colder than the room, heavier than physics allowed. The weight of it pressed into her palms like a held breath. She closed her fingers around it and pulled it to her chest. We are the ones who carry dead futures, she said, and use them as maps. The paradox line stayed open. Silence stretched across the command deck. Hale shifted. His boots scraped the metal floor. Kith-ni-Vael rose from his seat. His feathers rustled. He walked to the center of the room and faced Lena. His beak opened and closed twice before he spoke. The clicking rhythm of sincerity was slow, deliberate, as if each sound cost him something. Dr. Tarrow, on behalf of the Arae Technocracy Council, I formally request the establishment of a permanent defensive alliance between our species. He said the word defensive as if it tasted strange, as if he was not certain it belonged in his mouth. The Arae have never needed to defend, he said. We have only ever fled, we observed, we recorded, we retreated. That is our history, that is our nature. He paused, his feathers darkened at the tips. But we cannot outrun what we have witnessed here. You did not flee, you did not retreat. You fed your own into the machine and used the remainder as a wall. Lena's grip tightened on the object. "We fed a man into the machine, Kith." "Yes," Kith said, "and the hollow is gone." The room went quiet again. The repair drones hummed, the welding arcs crackled. Hale stood up. His joints popped. He walked toward Kith with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who had decided exactly what he was going to say and was not going to be interrupted. "Next time you see a distortion," Hale said, "you do not wait to confirm, you warn us, and you do not ask permission." Kith's feathers flattened. "Sergeant." "No," Hale's voice was flat, final. "You came to us with a problem you had been running from for centuries. You brought the hollow to our doorstep and let us figure out how to kill it. That does not happen again. If you see something that moves wrong, if you hear something that does not sound right, you send a message. Full bandwidth. No delay. No council approval. You tell us and we decide what to do with it." Kith was silent for a long moment. Then he inclined his head. A single, slow nod. Agreed. Hale stared at him. Then he turned and walked back to the bulkhead. He sat down. He picked up his rifle and placed it across his knees. Ryn-tha-Sol moved toward the console. Her hands brushed the surface where the object had rested. Her sensory nodules pulsed. She stopped. "There is an echo," she said. Lena turned. "What?" "In the object, the program ran. The power source is drained, but there is a residual trace." Ryn's head tilted. Her blind eyes stared at nothing. "It is compressed, like a seed, a single kernel of neural data folded into the crystalline structure." Lena's throat tightened. "Rook." "I cannot confirm identity. The signature is too faint, but it is human. It is a mind that was here and is now reduced to a single point of information." Ryn's voice dropped. "He is not alive, but he is not entirely absent either." Lena held the object tighter, the edges pressed into her ribs. "Secure this in the vault," she said. Her voice was steady. She did not know how. "Level 5 biometric lock, no remote access." Hart blinked. "Doctor, that object is the most significant discovery in." "It is also the weapon that killed Commander Rook," Lena said. "And humanity now has something the galaxy has never seen, a device that uses the pilot's identity as ammunition. We are going to study it. We are going to understand it. And we are not going to let it fall into anyone else's hands until we know exactly what we are holding." She did not know if she felt proud or horrified. The two emotions sat in her chest like stones, pressing against each other, refusing to merge. Hart opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. The paradox transmission crackled. The flat, timeless voice returned. "You have been marked. The Council of Timelines will decide if you are an asset or a liability." The line went dead. Silence flooded the command deck. The repair drones hummed. The welding arcs hissed. Normal sounds in a room that had stopped being normal hours ago. Lena set the object on the console. She walked to the remains of the viewport. The sky was blue. The stars were beginning to show at the edges, faint pinpricks of light that had not moved for billions of years. She thought of Rook, the way he touched his scar when he thought, the way he refused to let the colony fall, the way he had looked at the spreading non-color sky and accepted what he had to do. Humans did not win. They survived long enough to make the next fight possible. That was not a victory, it was a promise. She turned back to the room. Hale was still sitting against the bulkhead. Kith was still standing near the center, his feathers slowly returning to their normal silver. Ryn was brushing her fingers across the console, reading the vibrations of a station that had nearly died. Hart was staring at his comm panel. His face had gone white. "What is it?" Lena said. Hart looked up. "Long-range sensors just picked up a new anomaly. It is moving at a velocity that should be impossible." "What kind of anomaly?" "I do not have a match for it. It does not fit the hollow signature. It does not match any known race in the Arae database." Hart swallowed. "It is heading directly toward Earth." Lena's hand found the edge of the console. She gripped it. The object sat on the surface beside her. Cold, silent, heavy with the ghost of a man who had emptied himself to hold the line. She looked at the stars.